shortly be arriving at Hawley.
Travelling people from southern Asia, apparently, the Romani. I'm not sure if that many Romani gypsy travellers, as it was okay to say a decade ago, would identify with that in England. I'm not sure if Gitanos in Andalucia is much better, but mainly talking about the traditional cave dwellers of Sacremonte opposite the Alhambra in Granada, rather than the New Age travellers a little bit further up. Tending towards a New Age traveller dreadlocked mindset myself, I'm not sure if travellers should be out of the English phrase gypsy, because they just don't really travel very much. It can take generations to build a house, a permanent house on what was once a field that you parked your caravan in. But we're in Granada in Spain, seeing the side that people from southern Asia with conspicuous consumption, and seeing what acceptance they've found for their lifestyle choices and body choices. It's old advice that if you see a woman approaching you with heather, or children begging on street corners, and sometimes a violinist playing in a square, one of the things you must do is give them a coin or they will curse you with the evil eye. 100 years ago, there was a big migration from Eastern Europe, but there were Gitanos in Spain long before that. Linguistically, 300 BC and 600 AD, they left India. But as you can expect, there's some charming stories, origin myths. Medieval Persia now around. The arrival of the gypsies from India to Iran. The story goes that the Persian king wanted his people to work only half a day and spend the rest of their time eating and drinking to the sound of music. His people claim they didn't know how to make music. The king then sent for 10,000 male and female musicians to come from India. The king gave them food and supplies and sent them to the countryside to work on the land and play music. The Indian travellers recklessly ate everything without working. The king was angered and told them they should load their donkeys and travel the country, never settling down. They were to earn their living by singing. Once they began this itinerant life, they began to be called gypsies. People now wander the world seeking employment, associating with dogs and wolves and thieving on the road by day and by night. This founding myth followed the gypsy bands as they slowly wandered through Iran into Eastern Europe by the early 14th century. By the time they appeared in Europe, they'd come up with a new origin story that would give them entrance into Christendom. This went by way of claiming that they were from Egypt, and when the Holy Family fled there, the gypsies refused to give them shelter. Because of this, they were assigned a penance of 7 years of wandering. This story was often accompanied by documents of support, some clearly false, as from the Pope. But along the way, they persuaded other leaders to give them documents allowing them entry into lands and cities. A second Christian story claimed that the gypsies made 4 nails to crucify Christ, but they stole one to save Christ some suffering. Some gypsies claim that the holy deed gave them license to steal from non-gypsies, even as they were sentenced to wander for making the first 3 nails. This was not a founding myth that endeared them to others, but stories claimed they were told to stay on the move, and they did. It seems strange that gypsies would come up with a story that would make them not look good to Christian, but medieval people, like many today, loved redemption stories. Christians were frequently doing pilgrimages to expiate their own sins. A lot of people went on pilgrimage at the time, and the most legitimate explanation for travelling was to fulfil a vow or to pray at shrines. Furthermore, people who gave charity to such pilgrims felt that they gained spiritual merit. Gypsies fit right in, and gates were opened. At first, the great oak gates of walled cities opened for them, and citizens welcomed the strangers into their towns. People gazed in wonder at the flowing costumes and talented dancers as they dropped coins into bowls as gypsies played music. Fortune tellers acquired even more coins by promising love and prosperity to the longing. Then some people noticed their purses had been lifted and the food and goods had disappeared from their windows. As you can imagine, the gypsies' welcome wore thin and they moved on. This was a life of movement and associated social cohesiveness within that moving group. Everything depended on family ties and loyalty to kin. This was so pronounced that gypsies arranged marriage frequently between cousins, though first cousins were considered too close. Sometimes clans would expand by marriage with a neighbouring group, but family ties mattered more than anything else. As the tight-knit family groups wandered, they came to Spain, like all the travellers before. Some came across the Pyrenees and others across the Mediterranean. The earliest known document relating to gypsies in Europe dates from 1425, and Alfonso V of Aragon issued a safe conduct through his kingdom, which extended from the Pyrenees to Valencia, encompassing northeastern Spain. The safe conduct was issued by Sir John from Little Egypt, though of course he wasn't from Egypt at all. The pass included his band and was good for 3 months, but they weren't the last band to be welcomed into Spain. For the next several decades, records show that various bands of gitanos were welcomed into Spain and received safe conduct. By the 1470s, new waves came from the Mediterranean. These groups called themselves Greeks and claimed they were fleeing from Muslim Turks seeking sanctuary in Christian Spain.
Your coffee. Just a little bit or no?
Marap ka ng ano, ganun, huwag kang dumilata. Dilata. Hola, buenos tardes. Muy cumpleaños. Te amo, Maria.
Santiago de Compostela is in the northwest tip of Spain, above Portugal, but most gypsies, you would say, were in Andalucia now. Pilgrimage routes in Andalucia are less, though, because it was an Arab Moorish area for so much longer. When the Spanish Inquisition began in 1478 under King Ferdinand II of Aragon, nomadic Roma groups came under the supervision of religious authorities. The new system was based on a way of life and working conditions, and in a world of serfs and landlords, linked a faithful life to the local church and master. The Romani, with their romantic nomadic life and freelance jobs as musicians, smiths, horse dealers and craftsmen, escaped the system of surveillance. Under the Inquisition between 1500 and 1783, kings issued decrees that varied between the extremes of extermination and integration of the Roma. The aim was the radical uniformity of the nation-state. In 1774, a royal advisor spelled out the Spanish state would unify its people and mould them into one unique body. The gypsies in England certainly seemed to like to show off their body. Kept slim by putting malt vinegar and salt on fruit, apparently. The Spanish Inquisition expelled 300,000 Jewish people and 300,000 Muslim people that didn't want to be converted to Catholicism, even on a superficial basis. The tripartite country of Iberia that had been working well, Catholics weren't dominant enough. None of our transgender friends here faced any sort of real Inquisition in modern-day Granada. In 1500, an Inquisition cardinal did a first racial law ordering forced conversions to Catholicism of all Grenadians, people from Granada. This extended throughout the Kingdom of Castile. Many Muslims and Jews converted to Catholicism and were called Moors and pigs, establishing the difference between new and old Catholics. I know it's bad, it sounds like modern-day America, and the illegals, and those of high birth rate around New York. A century later, King Philip III expelled them all from Spain and ordered the Roma out as well. Most Muslims and Jews migrated to North Africa, France, the Netherlands, and the Ottoman Empire, Turkey. But the Roma had no political religious alliances. They had no willing hosts elsewhere. Most remained in Spain as fugitives living on charity on the edges of urban areas. Philip III acknowledged the existence of nomadic Roma groups. 2 decades later, under penalty of death, all Roma should leave Spanish territories within 6 months and not return. Those wishing to stay can do so if they abandon their nomadic life and move into our towns. Also, they should abandon their traditional costumes, names, and their language. 1750, a Marquis minister orders the imprisonment of all Roma Imprisonment must be carried out on the same day and at the same time. These people called gitanos have no religion. They must be put in prison and we will end this evil race.
1, 2, 3.
After a mass arrest, the Great Raid, they were separated, all males over 7 in one group, females and children under 7 in another. The males were to be sent to forced labour in the arsenals or in the navy, the females and children to prisons and national factories. A decade or so later, King Charles III comes along and the Romani were notified that they could be released. But the complex abolitionist administration first had to solve the problem of relocation. 1765, the Navy ordered the release of all prisoners. In 1783, some Roma who had been enslaved were finally released. But Charles ordered new rules to punish the vagrancy of the Roma people. Castellanos, they're still forbidden to use their language, their costumes, and maintain their nomadic way of life. They were considered the enemies of Spanish values, evil, godless and lazy people. An ideological legacy that undoubtedly influenced the Franco dictatorship just before the Second World War and their anti-Roma laws. Franco was of course opposed in bloody revolution, but discrimination is only there if you let it be. Constant vigilance. Hold it to account where and when you see it happens, whether it's Romani, Gypsy, Gitanos or transgender people that are being discriminated against by multinational institutions like YouTube. (1954 to 79), sadly. The Vagrants and Common Delinquents law of General Franco's government was modified under his regime to prohibit homosexual acts with a penalty of imprisonment. In 1979, the law on danger and social rehabilitation was introduced that further enforced the prohibition and specified a prison term of up to 5 years. Thankfully, in 1979, the Suarez government, when Spain adopted democracy, reversed the previous prohibitions on same-sex activity. The 1970 law on danger and social rehabilitation remained active until 1995, but was unenforced after democracy started. But democracy of the body is so much more complicated than just same-sex relationships, obviously. 2005, Spain became the third country in the world to legalise gay marriage following the Netherlands and Belgium. The law, which was passed by the Spanish Parliament and signed into law by the Prime Minister, José Rodríguez Zapatero, also allows same-sex couples to adopt children. The urban leasing law of the same year, 1994, allows registered cohabitation for same-sex couples, which granted some of the rights previously reserved for married couples. In Spain, there are no laws restricting discussion or promotion of LGBTQ topics. Reports or evidence will no longer be needed for a person to make an official registration change of their gender identity. According to the General Directorate of Sexual Diversity and Rights, this can be done through a system of double appearance without medical or judicial protection. It's a legal thing. Surgery is not required. Changing your legal gender does not require surgery. The hills of Granada are full of people that have decided that instead of poisoning both their souls and lungs with big city life, they'd rather up and move to a cave in southern Spain. The majority of these caves can be found in Granada's Alhambra and Sacremonte districts, areas protected by World Heritage Site status, because there's the view across to the Alhambra and from the Alhambra across to the Gypsy Caves. Back in 1963, the then inhabitants of these caves were evicted from their homes by the Franco government after heavy rainfall caused landslides and flooding across the city. However, over the last few decades, those abandoned caves were reopened. Some families have successfully applied for housing permits, but many others haven't bothered. Homes can be made or extended just by digging with a pickaxe into the tufa-type rock, which is the same type of rock as the catacombs around Rome, Italy. But the Alhambra cave community is largely made up of immigrants and those looking to embrace an alternative way of life, all of them welcoming of outsiders looking for a short-term place to stay. Sacremonte, meanwhile, is split into two communities. One that is home to families that have lived there for generations, the other comprised of travellers and free spirits. Regardless of where you live, though, you'll be treated to some of the best views of Granada, where you'll spot some of Spain's most popular landmarks. Living cheek by jowl, the Roma and flamenco community that have established museums and concert places. Life is calm for a few illegal immigrants in the caves. They suffer less racism, and the city and the community is just on the doorstep. A guy from Dakar in Senegal waiting to be legalised might live next to the Roma, and the Spanish, the residents of Granada's famous caves, say they will continue to fight accusations that the community is full of drug addicts, violence and rabid dogs. They want people to know that each person takes care of their own cave in their own way. There's a strong wider community that makes life in these caves worthwhile and worth protecting. At the same time, the type of people that are attracted to this way of life, the authorities want to know about them. They accept that. The more concrete the track, the more dense the development, multi-use, multi-purpose it's supposed to be, according to the town plan. Expert Vagabond gives one side of the Roma, Gitano, nomad hippie and legal immigrant love triangle that's going on in their caves. National Geographic could give you much more about the flamenco. Far from the conspicuous consumption of shopping on our trip to Granada, to give you a mental image of the caves higher up, imagine Neanderthals with solar panels. Rather vegan or vegetarian Neanderthals with solar panels. did a lot of investigations over a number of years. There's still north of Granada, nearby half an hour, half an hour to the beach near Salabona, beautiful place Salabona with a nice nice fort. Much of the Costa Tropical is plastic sheeted polytunnels, halfway between Granada and Salabona, Ranjaran, there's Orgivia, further up into the mountains, which has a significant vibe to it in a way you might say to the Sacramento Caves, but more abundant vegetable green smallholding type vibe as well. Some ex-member of Genesis wrote books about squashing oranges or lemons, diving over lemons, I think it was, like that's a scientific book, nice.
Lingon.
Water is like gold, like feuds can start over someone taking more than a allotted number of days, diverting the trickle of the watercourse. The villages of the Lekran Valley around Lake Isnafar, I think it's a reservoir, and 16 properties for sale in the dirt, English estate agents, and soaked up the atmosphere of the different villages, full of a potential location of an architectural concept for myself as an enlightened client, with no time constraints, and just an ad hoc budget, all crafted by my own fair hand.
Hindi meron dito tinan mo nga yung mga mixed seafoods na naman.
La paradeta es cara. Una está pasada y la otra
Ahí.
Buti na nga lang nauuso yung highways.
Thanks be to God. Saka yung book culture.
pwede mo i-search yung ano yung black market.
Spain had got some interesting ideas they put in place regarding squatters and also way of dealing with the Russians. But so they weren't specially targeted, that same rule applied to everyone, and you could be taxed for the same thing in your home country and then in Spain. So I rolled out Spain as my holiday home architectural vision, which I could then advertise to all. I focused on Italy. You had to forget the half hour to the ski slopes, half hour to the beach, unless we went for Kotor, Montenegro, Croatia. Very slightly stretched out. But the best property I saw there was called Budapest at the time. I know, pathetic, but I read that one out. Rwanda was appearing promising to me. Andalucia again, closer to the madness of Marbella. Yes, International Vernacular Architecture 1 week field study trip was the first time I visited Sacremonte Cave, opposite the Alhambra in Granada. We were to do an urban design project to increase the density of the population of the area without changing the character adversely. So we surveyed the area, including even lay down the caves with just a curtain in front, a mattress on the floor, and condoms strewn all around the mattress. Not that particular property, but the Granada area in general, certainly the Albus Inn, following the head of department that hosted us at her place. For very little money, we could afford to build and renovate a place, a rural house type place, towards the town centre, and live in an amazing climate. How easy it is to get a job there instead of London as an architect, I'm not too sure.
Gracias.
The smell of an old building that's had people eating a lot of pork products in a very hot climate is quite interesting. The sweat that soaks into the lime walls seems to contain their hormones almost and their thoughts. It can be a bit like a haunting. Though I had objections about greenfield sites, some of those were the most interesting by far. 1,000 years ago, the moors were terracing in the hillsides. The olive trees that they planted there were of a particular old species that were so huge you could walk underneath them and not touch the bottom branches with the top of your hand. They really looked like they'd been there 1,000 years. Yeah, like a rare species apple cider, and the thought of chopping down any of these rare olive trees to build a however enlightened vision of a property meant that the concept really had to dance around between the trees. Hop from one level terrace to the next. Very loosely linked, you only need heating 3 months of the year, lots of inside-outside space. But however that's dealt with, it's never going to outshine the inside-outside space of the canopy of the ancient olive trees. Even with the concept of semi-encircling and acute angles, jaggedy, so that it feels like it's the machine that shakes the tree, that fells the fruit. It was an intimidating sight for a design, and no one would really appreciate the subtleties of the environmentalism that had gone into it. As at the Alhambra, dealing with water, taking water through the site would perhaps be the most beautiful thing. The other elements, air, and that needed for cooking or rare heating, fire. But the sea view gave it a price out of reach really for all graduates. I put in a few silly offers in a few places,